the Jamaicans overseas want it. We're not going to get rich by just bringing down the debt. We're going to get rich by exporting a lot more. So grow exports, create job opportunities, drive economic growth through exports to make Jamaica a richer and much more prosperous country.
Most Jamaicans will tell you corruption in politics is deep-rooted, and that's just so it's said, and nothing can do about that. But actually, there is, and another 152 countries are doing it. It's called asset declaration, and it works best where citizens themselves understand it and help to ensure the law is enforced. Corruption happens when public officials abuse their power to benefit themselves, family, or associates. Jamaica's Integrity Commission Act was designed to prevent corruption, and here are 5 things you should know. 1. Under this law, every year MPs and senators must report what they earn, own, and owe, and if they don't, they'll be sanctioned. 2. Their report must include the same kind of information for their wife or husband and children. 3. If they get a gift worth more than $100,000 from anyone who's not family, they must declare it. 4. A summary of the declarations of our Prime Minister and opposition leader must be published where the public can read it. 5. Parliamentarians can now be prosecuted by the Integrity Commission. They can be fined up to $2 million or serve up to 2 years in prison if they don't file, if they give false information, and $500,000 for not filing on time or ignoring requests for information. Unfortunately, our parliamentarians made changes that prevent the public from knowing when they've broken the law or when they're being investigated. We really need to change that. Visit jampja.org to find out more about the Act and to track if your MP is obeying this law. If they're not, JAMP's MP Tracker will help you write, tweet, or call your MP. Ask them, you submit your declaration yet? The Integrity Commission clear you? Let's help the Parliament stay honest. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
No apologies from anybody. Yes.
I have an apology for absence for Minister Kerencia Morrison.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Rhoda Moy Crawford. All right, welcome and opening remarks. Well, welcome to the meeting. My focus on my style is efficiency. So I'm not somebody who's going to spend a lot of time going over things. I want persons to come to the meeting prepared. I want persons to come to the meeting ready to have meaningful discussion. And I promise not to have you here longer than you ought to be, because most of our meetings may be on a Thursday, and most parliamentarians have a lot of priorities, more other priorities on a Thursday, so I don't plan to have you here long. Now, this is our first meeting, and it's about procedural matters. But before you, Ms. Shaw and Ms. Rhoda Moy, you're going to have copies of five documents in front of you. A private member's motion brought by Member Warmington. And I really I hope you read it. You just saw it? Just seeing it. All right, it was in the email sent to you. But you can look through it quickly, read it. I'll give you 5 minutes, because it's really a quick read, because I just want us to discuss it and make some decisions on how we're going to deal with it. So I'll give you 5 minutes to read it. It's a simple read. All right. So everybody got a chance to at least glance over what has been sent to this committee for our consideration. These, as elected members of parliament, all of these issues are things that would affect us directly. Maybe agree with some of the suggestions, maybe I don't agree with some of the suggestions. Me personally, if I'm allowed to say how I personally feel, in the last general election we had, I had over 600 rejected ballots. That is unprecedented. I hear other members in the parliament who I've spoken to who have also had some unprecedented amounts of spoiled ballots for things, some of the things that are even in this right here, counterfoil, and people use something apart from a pencil, or some people shade art. So what I'm saying is that the things that Member Warmington advocating for is some things that have direct implications on all elected officials. So it is of my opinion. Well, I want to hear from Ms. Shaw and Ms. Rhoda Moy how you want us to deal with these matters. But it's something that needs proper ventilation because it has far-reaching implications. I know how I feel, but we need to hear how you feel, and I think we may need to also go wider, probably see how our constituents feel. One of the recommendations is for the polling station to open at 7 as normal and close at 6 instead of 5. Another recommendation is any instrument at all that the person used to mark the X should be accepted. If it's a pen, crayon, pencil, dirt, right, whatever. Another recommendation is once the intent of the voter is clear, it should be accepted. I've seen ballots where people shade, people do a tick, people put the X through the person's name. So these have some far-reaching implications that I think we should seriously consider it, and I want some recommendations as to how, Madam, after listening to the members and hear what their suggestions are, because these are not things that we can just digest today or tomorrow and make a decision, because they have some serious implications, but they're worthwhile of being here, in my opinion, because I've been affected. I've seen a perfectly good ballot, and because it wasn't torn properly. So somebody go to the polling station, and mark them X beside the preferred candidate, but because it was open and not torn against the perforated line, they rejected the ballot. So that person's ballot was rejected because it wasn't torn properly, right? Or somebody used a pen and marked X beside Smith. Them throw it away because you're only supposed to use a pencil. So suppose I lost by 1 vote. So these are some things, Madam Shaw, Ms. Shaw.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with the voters' intent, right? But I wouldn't want to deviate from that lead pencil that is situated in the booth, the poll booth. But once there is a mark that shows intention for a particular candidate, I would say yes to that. The close of the polling station, I wouldn't want to deviate from 7 to 5. One of the reasons is in some of the remote areas, like I have remote areas like Rowlandsfield, Beacon Hill, I am looking at security. That's my view. This is not a political statement. I am just looking at security for those persons. So I would not want to deviate from that 5 o'clock close of poll. And another reason, you have some persons who work, because that was stated at the last discussion we had. Some of the persons who employ them, they don't want to give them the time off, and that is in law. They have to get at least 3 hours. So I would want to keep it that way. But for the intent, the voter intent, I would say yes on that. Once there is a mark, it doesn't matter what mark it is. They say an X for now, but once there is an intent. And I reiterate that I would not want to deviate from the pencil. That is the preferred mark. Thank you.
All right, I hear you. No, as we were making the final decisions, but it's interesting to hear the thoughts of the members. And we need to decide now. It is important to know what we need to know. What I want the members to tell me is for the next meeting, who would you like us to invite to come and make presentations? I think we need to, of course, have somebody from the Electoral Office of Jamaica. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. All right, so looking through the motions here, I notice there is, for example, a recommendation to amend Section 33 of the Representation of the People's Act that touch on concerns the taking of poll and the ballot. There's also another recommendation to amend Section 35.3, which deals with general mode of taking ballot. There's also another recommendation to amend Section 41A1, which deals with outdoor agents. Another recommendation to do amendment to Section 44.3 that deals with proceedings after poll. Now, as you have rightly outlined, Chair, that these amendments will affect, going forward, electoral policy and can have long-term effects and implications. When we think about that, these amendments, they may seem on the face of it, oh, we just amended a single provision, but it will touch and concern other provisions within the legislation. And you have to bear in mind that this particular legislation, the Representation of the People Act, was amended 2024, 2020, 2016. So we have to consider how these amendments here will affect previous amendments. So on that note, I'm recommending that we invite representatives from the Attorney General Chambers, representatives from the Legal Reform Department that deals particularly with policy, as well as possibly the Chief Parliamentary Council that deals with legislative drafting. So those are 3, and as you said, from the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, because we need that policy and legislative guidance in order to proceed. So you'll have the practical, technical experience here from the members, but when you touch on concern legislative amendment and policy development, because that's really the area that we'll be venturing into, we need the guidance of those entities.
Good. All right, so we'll invite those members of those entities to our next meeting. Also, what I'd like to know by the time we have our next meeting is what obtains in other jurisdictions. I know some persons here have experience with elections in other islands, but I want to know exactly what happens. Like we have an election in Barbados now, on the 11th. I want to know what obtains in other jurisdictions. If any of these recommendations are similar to what happens in our neighboring countries. So I want that to be done for our next meeting also. What obtains in other jurisdictions as it relates to these recommendations. We're going to invite those persons that you have recommended, including somebody from the Electoral Office of Jamaica, because I want somebody to come and tell me. I mean, some of the ballots that were not accepted by the returning officer on election day. The only reason why I never made a big fuss out of it is because my margin was so huge. But if it was somebody with a small margin, that 600 votes can turn an election. You know, of the 600 votes, at least 500 were mine. Because the PMP lost votes also, not me alone. So it was unprecedented to have that many. I think I even spoke to a member Remember Terry Long? He had a huge number of rejected ballots also in his constituency. Also, and maybe you could guide me again, we'd want to get submissions from members of the public. I know that in my constituency, I have a monthly meeting with my constituency executive, and I will bring it to them, especially the one about the outdoor agents, because election day is a problem with outdoor agents and the police. You know, the 20 yards from the station, and we need something to. That's what I really want the electoral office person here. So we're going to also want some submissions from the public. All right? I think that is all we need. Oh, our member, Rhoda Moy Crawford.
Just to say that I'm in agreement with inviting the various groups to share their thoughts, and also as a member of parliament, even though I have my own thoughts and observations, I too would want to have a discussion with my electoral representatives, my constituents, to see how they feel about any changes that we want to look at. In terms of the adjustment to time, section 33, what I have observed in other jurisdictions, St. Lucia, for example, Jamaica has almost a population of almost 3 million. Of course, I know not all of those persons are on the voters list, but we have a very large voting population. St. Lucia in 2024 had less than 200,000, and their polls go from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the evening. I wouldn't have a difficulty with us extending the voting hours. Based on my own observation, moving around my constituency on election day, we have more than 100 polling stations in Manchester Central. And while the law clearly states that employers are to allow their employees time off to vote, I have received multiple complaints from supporters that they are told they can't leave for whatever reason. In some instances, I had to write letters to employers. And so a lot of these establishments work ends at 5. So I don't have a difficulty with the additional hour to facilitate those who would have that difficulty. But that's my personal thought, and I would still feel more comfortable if we properly ventilate the issue and get some more feedback.
All right. So as our senior legislative counsel mentioned, a lot of these topics, a lot of these suggestions affect other things. And I hear you, Rhoda Moy Crawford, member Rhoda Moy Crawford. We have to set some timelines. So I know I'm going to go back to my constituency and try and get the feedback. Rhoda Moy mentioned she's going to do the same. I figure everybody may need to do the same. But we need to have some timelines. We're now in February 2026. What is a realistic timeline for us to get back submissions from the public and from our constituents to bring to this committee? What do you think is a reasonable timeline? 2 months? 3 months? Let me hear from you, Ms. Shaw.
I would think that 2 months would be a reasonable time.
In 2 months. So we're saying March, April. In 2 months, there will be a cutoff time for submissions from the public, including our constituents. Also, what I'll also do is to share and get feedback from even our caucus. And Ms. Shaw, you can do the same. Get feedback from your caucus. That will also fall within the 2-month timeline as to what are their views on these matters. Just to touch on something what Ms. Crawford said about employees and not allowing staff to go and vote. That has been a big problem. It wasn't so bad for me in my constituency on a general election day. But on the by-election day, when I had a significantly low voter turnout, what aided and abetted that was that employers, they don't take by-election serious. That's a foo-foo something. You know what I mean? But the law is the employee should be allowed to go and vote. So we have to find out ways how we can strengthen that. Maybe we need more public education. Maybe we need to let people know the seriousness of not allowing somebody to go and vote. You know, Miss Senior Legislative Council, that is something that you can look at. But as a member, Crystal Lee wanted to say something.
Yes, Chair. So I'm in full agreement that it would be good for us to speak to our constituents and get their feedback. But also, I share a similar experience as MP Rhoda Moy Crawford, where I had to write letters for employees to be able to give in the time. But outside of that, though, I'm looking forward to that meeting with EOJ because they have seemingly implemented some new steps. So it significantly slowed down the voting process. So whereas it would probably take, on an average, probably 2 minutes or so, or 5 minutes for one person to vote, it increased, I would say, by double the amount of time. On looking at all my polling stations on election day, I would have realized huge turnouts of persons in lines just looking there, waiting, complaining of how long the process was. So that for me is one of the points that I'm really looking to discuss with EOJ, because that would tie in direct relation to perhaps, you know, giving more consideration for an extension. But I would want to say, you know, it's still there on the table for discussion. So I'm really looking forward to hear from them the different steps that they have put in to this last election and how more efficient it can be, because it is a cause for concern. And I really have constituents who complain that they had locked the doors on them and they were not able to vote. So I saw where it was a problem in my area.
Member Lee, I'm so happy you brought that up and sad at the same time, because it almost bringing up some PTSD. What you call that thing where you come from war and you're scared? In that last election, Member Lee, we had last general election, we also had some by-elections on the same day. And I can speak for my constituency of Northwest St. Andrew. We had the general elections and the by-elections to fill the vacancy left for the Chancery Hall division that what I vacated, right? And people were in line for more than 4 or 5 hours because they're doing when you go to the polling station, when you go into the an elector in the Chancery Hall division within the constituency, they get 2 ballots. And what we're finding was that some persons are only getting the ballots if they ask for it. They were being automatically given 2 ballots and say, listen to me, there are 2 elections in this division and constituency. Also, it is important, we have to have somebody here from Electoral Office of Jamaica. Once you don't have the voter's ID, it is chaos in the polling station. I mean, people in Meadowbrook High School, 5, 6, 7 hours, Red Hills Basic School, 5, 6, 7. If the persons were not so happy with the representation of their member of parliament at the time, candidate at the time, they wouldn't have stayed in line so long. You know what I mean? But people stayed, rain started to fall. I had to come up with all sorts of creative ways to keep them to stay there. You know, so, but again, this meeting is just procedural matters. We're not going too deep into it, but already you can see where it's going to go, because everybody has an opinion, and it's going to these decisions that are going to be made in this committee has a direct effect on each and every one of us who have to go and seek the people's support again in a couple of years. So we're going to close off on that. So for the next meeting, we're going to invite the person that you have mentioned. I want you to repeat it again, who is going to be important. 1 second. Okay, go ahead, Rhoda.
While I listen to the contribution of Member Lee, I would want to suggest that the first person that should be invited here should be representatives from the EOJ. I think it's important for us to hear their thoughts on these sections that we want to or consider to make amendments to see what is their thought process behind it and what are the possible implications. I think once we have heard from them, then we can further proceed to invite others in. I also wanted to follow up on the contribution of Member Rose Shaw, in terms of the voter intention and the accepting of certain marks. That is another area that I want us to properly ventilate, because I have seen where even at recount or the counting following an election, there are different representatives from the EOJ, and what one person might say, this is acceptable. By the time another team comes or an additional member of the team comes the other day, something that was accepted the day before is rejected or vice versa. I think there's too much subjectivity. And I mean, even with the X, you know, the ones that look a little shaky, sometimes it's the senior citizens who are writing and marking the X, and they can't avoid the shake. So I think that's another one that we must pay very close attention to.
Madam Senior Legislative Counsel.
All right, so I agree. I've listened to the recommendations from you, Chair, as well as the members, and I agree with Member Crawford in terms of the approach that can be taken. So we commence with the ECJ. But listening to the recommendations, this obviously will go beyond the amendments of the provisions that we have stated here, because it will result in amendments to other provisions in the legislation. So when it comes to the invitation, let's say, for example, the Legal Reform Department that deals with specifically legislative policy, I'm just thinking, you can indicate whether you agree or disagree. In their invitation, we ask them to look at the legal implication and the policy implication for these amendments, but also are there other sections or provisions within the legislation that may require amendment as well that we probably wouldn't be contemplating? Just a thought. So the invitation would not just relate to these specific amendments, but maybe just an overall review of the legislation to see what provisions. I don't want to go too much outside of the ambit of our meeting, but maybe just to say, do a comparative analysis to say, yes, Section 33 requires amendment, but it will also impact Section, let's say, 44. So just to expand a little bit in terms of other areas of the legislation that may need amendment in order to be effective. Just a thought.
I'm looking at another motion by Member Philip Paulwell, speaking about the re-verification of the voters list. That too, I think, is a very important topic that we need to discuss and see the necessary interventions. Because very often what I've observed is, well, we know in Jamaica we use our voter ID, the voter card, as a national ID. And
Conroda, just for accuracy of the record, it's not from Paulwell, it's from Member Warmington. You only see Paulwell name because he spoke on the actual. Right. All of them is, everything is from Member Warmington. But Paulwell spoke on it in Parliament.
But this wasn't one of the re-verification was a part of the bill. Okay, good. Okay, so by Member Warmington. Yeah, so in Jamaica, we know that the voter ID card is also used as a national ID. And what I see generally in the constituency, a lot of persons who have the voter ID, it was not because they had any intention of participating in the electoral process of voting. They just want the ID to do their business. And I've always been concerned when we report low voter turnout. So apart from just the funding for re-verification, I think one intervention that could really capture the true voter turnout is I lived in Dutch St. Martin a while, and what I noticed that happens there, apart from their various national IDs, anyone who is interested in voting, they have to visit, I don't remember what they call it, if it's the registrar, whatever their department is, they have to apply specifically for a voting card. So if 100 persons go for the voting card, they went because we know they had an intention to vote. If 90% vote from that, then you have an accurate depiction of the voter turnout. With our system, it's very difficult to tell. It's not just about the dead people who we have on the voters list and we need to clean up. Because persons use it for ID, you can never have an accurate depiction of, you know, if you're following my thoughts.
I follow exactly what you're saying, Member Crawford. I follow exactly what you're saying. But again, I don't want us to go too deep in it today. Today is just for us to decide. We looked at the recommendations from Member Warmington and his private member's motion, and we have already decided of who we're going to invite to guide us down that path to making these a reality, yes or no, because we're going to take 2 months to get feedback from our constituents and caucuses on their opinions and their views on these matters. Each of us has mentioned already how some of these recommendations has directly impacted your electability and your election in the past. So at the next meeting, you want to say something, Member Shaw? 1 second. So as it relates to the voters list, just a quick thing, I don't want to get into much detail. It is the most frustrating thing as a politician, even when I was a councillor, to hear the pundits, political pundits, and the general population complain about the low voter turnout. It slightly upsets me because it's not true. Because what obtains in the election is not anywhere near the true voter intent. Because in most constituencies, about 30% or 40% of the persons don't exist anymore. You can't find them, whether they have migrated or they have transitioned. So what we're seeing is, so when you hear that there's a 7% turnout and a 10%, is not true. You know, it is not true. So that is another thing that would possibly get my support. But again, the decision won't be made today. The decision is going to be made after we have done our consultations and we have heard from the entities with the expertise. A quick question before Ms. Shaw comes in for the group here. Is it possible, are you opposed to us bringing the EOJ and the team that the Senior Legislative Council recommended on the same day? That's possible? Because I like to deal with efficiency, you know. I don't want us to come down here more than we have to come down here. You know, so the next meeting, I'd like the EOJ, maybe the EOJ could present first. But let's hear let me hear from Ms. Shaw first, and then we hear from Ms. Crawford.
2 things I would agree with. I didn't hear the legal department. Will the legal department be a part of this meeting? Because it's very important when you look at, you know, like the various implications of the laws from the Attorney General's department. They're on the list. Very well. Well, I think that we could invite them simultaneously and have EOJ do their presentation, but I wouldn't want them to just do that and leave. I want everybody to be in the room. And I also agree with the re-verification. I know you're not going into all of this, but when I look at a PD that I am familiar with, that's a PD that I voted. And we were going through the other day, you know, our usual canvas. And I was appalled to see the amount of persons who migrate, other persons, they are in other areas, St. Catherine, they don't even bother to turn out. And it's a huge chunk of that voters list. So I agree with you that it's not a true reflection of when they're saying it's a low voter turnout. So that needs to be addressed immediately.
Member Crawford.
I think this may come under this, the part about accepting certain marks or voter intention. I have a real problem when ballots are rejected, whether for me or my opponent in an election, not because the intention wasn't clear or that the voter did not mark properly. They have marked properly, intention is very clear, but because the presiding officer didn't rip the ballot paper properly from the booklet. I don't think that, that needs to be front and center of the discussion for EOJ.
I said that earlier, you may have stepped out of the room. That's one of the most frustrating ones. Because the person came, joined a line, did their part, and because of somebody's, for lack of a better word, negligence, that person have lost that vote. And those 1-1, 2-2 votes, it matters in seats that have close margins. Every vote counts. Every vote counts. So again, this is going. I see we're going to have a very productive and healthy discussion on these matters. And now I think we're going to wrap up for today. But I want to know: is it possible for us to now set the date for the next meeting? I'm going to try and set the date for the next meeting right now. You find that the other committees get. Let's go early April. Okay. Right. I'd prefer if it's not on a Thursday, because Thursdays are challenging to get members of parliament here. We can have, the 2 days are available. We have April 1st and we have April 2nd. We can't have it on All Fools Day, so we're going to have to go back on a Thursday then. So April 2nd is the scheduled date for the next meeting. It's going to be a Thursday. So tell your constituents you're going to come late that day. And the date, what do you want to have the deadline for submission? Right. Okay. And the deadline for the submissions from the public will be the 31st of March. So we'll meet again on the 2nd of April, 10 o'clock in the morning, where we'll have presentations by, I just want to, the 2nd of April is our next meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning. Here, Ms. Lee? 10 o'clock in the morning. And remind us again, Ms. Senior Legislative Counsel, of the persons who will be invited to that meeting.
All right, Chair. So based on our discussion, the listing will comprise of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. You have the Attorney General Chambers. The Electoral Commission of Jamaica. You have the Attorney General Chambers, the Legal Reform Department, the Office of the Parliamentary Counsel.
No, I was just wondering, are you sure you don't want us next month to just have the EOJ ventilate our issues, hear what their concerns are, and then get the feedback on everybody else in April?
Member, we can do whatever the committee wants. So if that is the recommendation of the committee, we will have the EOJ by themselves to interrogate them properly next month. Next month is March, you know. We can do whatever the committee wants. All right, give me a date in March for the EOJ. Give us a second, we'll check. Remember, next month is the budget debate schedule, you know. Yeah, it's a busy month. So do we have to do the date? Can we run robin and do the date at another time? We have to do it right now. Yeah, we'll round robin, but it is the recommendation and the desire of the committee to have the EOJ first, so they can properly interrogate the EOJ. Yes. Any changes will be done via email. Please check your emails.
When do I ask EOJ to submit their paper?
No, can you use that later?
No, it's that decision of committee. We have to make decision of committee.
I'm being advised by the committee clerk that we have to, when we write to EOJ, they're going to have to send us a submission as to what they're going to come and present on, and what's the deadline you'd want to give them. It's difficult to give them a deadline when we don't know the date we're going to invite them, because as you just said, March is going to be kind of tough.
No, but as long as it is before the date of the meeting.
Yeah, man. It would be before the date of the meeting. Or you could bring them in April. You could bring them in April, and we have. Go again.
No, I was saying if there is a concern regarding getting the letter written to the EOJ for them to do a submission, what was the issue? Okay, well, my thought was that if it's required 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't know what's the response turnaround time from them. If that poses a problem, then we could revert to the original plan of having them in April, if we want to give ourselves time to write them and get the responses.
Another thing we could do is have them on the date that we have already established, which is the 2nd of April. We have the EOJ on that date, and we have the meeting with the other parties after. Let's not mix the EOJ and the other agencies. So what we'll do is have a firm date of April 2, 10 o'clock for the EOJ to come in and present to the committee, and we'll give them a deadline of the 31st of March. Would be good for them. And the 31st of March would be the deadline for their papers to come in. All right? Closing. And in closing now, as I said to you before, I see that we're going to have a very, very robust discussion on these matters. All of these matters will directly affect each and every one of us as elected members here. So I'm very pleased with it. I like the spirit, and look forward to seeing you all again on the 2nd of April at 10 o'clock. Thank you. You want to move for adjournment? What?
I'd like to move for the adjournment.
All right. And Ms. Shaw?
I second the motion.
And I want everybody to have a productive and safe day.
Thank you.
All
And the
right.
same to you, Chair.
Ms. Shaw, you don't need to go into your constituency, though. You're all right. All right? You don't need to go down there.
I don't need to. That's where I'm heading.
Of the Prime Minister.
I wonder who that somebody be. No, sir. Let me look for my glasses. Oh, that somebody look like rice up. It's Lottie, walk on. Me glad for see you, Roy. Although things never go on for you, America, me glad say you there.
Yeah.
Lift your head high.
Yeah.
Stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
And you can have a fresh start back home.
All right, Mr. P. Thanks, you hear?
Let's all work together for a fresh start back home.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
In Jamaica, there needs to be one law for all. Every member of this society, regardless of profession, finances, or the area you live in.
I have some bad news.
The company didn't get the contract?
The money they paid us for it has gotten out.
Are you serious?
I'm afraid so. And I understand that there are going to be corruption charges.
Minister, please come with us, sir.
Breaking news. A senior politician